second thing I think architects are really great at is zeroing in on the character of their client and bringing that to life in every dimension of the project, right? So if you think about all the favorite work that you've done, it's because not only it's great architecture, but it's great architecture because it expresses the character of your client. So what we thought was we'd have a little conversation about character, and I would kick us off here by sparking some of our thoughts. So our first story about character starts actually in Russia with Peter Tchaikovsky in 1892. So I don't know how many of you are big music fans, but Peter, or Pyotr, was a government clerk. I don't know if you know that. And he had actually a not very interesting government clerk job. And Pyotr got pissed off because one of his colleagues was promoted ahead of him, and he felt unjustifiably so. And so he quit being a government clerk. And thank God for the world, right? Because it was at that point that he took up music. And what I want you to do is first listen to this piece that he wrote some 30 years after he stopped. He was kind of a late bloomer, 30 years after he was a government clerk. So listen to the melody, listen to the instrumentation, listen to this. Obviously, it's a holiday favorite, so listen to it. So fast forward some 70 years to a second composer, 1963, Duke Ellington. Listen to his version of Nutcracker. Open your ears and listen to this piece. Okay, so compare those two pieces. So our very first lesson is that a strong character that's been really well defined, that as long as that essence can remain the same, everything about it can actually change and you still recognize that character. So think about Perkins and Will. Think about our clients. Think about the character of those institutions, that you can adapt a lot about it, but that essence should still come true. If you know what you're about, you can vary it quite a bit. So that's our first lesson. Keep that in your mind. We're going to use them as we do the charrette today. Second lesson. So think about it this way. You're entering a movie theater somewhere, and you hear this music. What are you likely to see next? What are the images that come in your mind? 007. So think about the unique character of 007. Think about that whole franchise. Think about all the movies, all the films. So what's Bond's favorite car? Sometimes a BMW, usually an Aston Martin. Absolutely, you got it. So think about that as a getaway car. Think about that in terms of what it says about the owner. Think about the sophistication of that. Think about the debonair quality of that. What does that look like? Tell us about the villains. So Goldfinger, Dr. No. Think about all of the villains, their capabilities, his cunning when he goes against the villains. Think about 007 can get himself out of almost any situation with his intelligence and his charisma. What does 007 sound like, right? So there are classic lines across the years: shaken, not stirred, Bond, James Bond. But if you think about how Bond sounds, Bond has a unique way of sounding, how he gets out of a predicament, what he says, his cool in a given situation. Bond is unique that way. The gadgets. So think about all the gadgets. Think about all the things that he has to get out of a tough situation. Think about Bond himself. I think what's interesting about Bond is there have been 23 Bond films, 6 different actors who have played Bond, or I like to say 5 different actors that have played Bond, and Pierce Brosnan, who I think does not count. But the point is that franchise, when they've gotten it right, Bond is Bond through all of those movies, and the actor actually fades to the background, that you accept that actor in the role because the specificity of the character is such that you say that's James Bond, which is why Pierce Brosnan doesn't work. He didn't fit, right? Bond has certain other preferences here as well that are also quite distinctive. So it brings us to our second lesson about character. So think about Perkins and Will. Think about the clients we do work with. This next element of character, this notion that character is defined by the details, by the specificity of every element. How things look, sound, think, perform. Right? It's every detail. I think you have to have a certain reverence for detail if you're going to be an architect, right? It actually does count the details that we pick. Okay, let's talk about our third lesson. We've talked a little bit about individuals having charisma and character. What about institutions? You know, what makes China, China? Or what makes France, France? Or what makes America, America? And let's just kind of examine what it means when you're part of a collective, when you're part of an idea. So think a little bit about America and think a little bit about the character of the United States. And you know, think about the founding of the country and that the country was founded on this notion of a chance to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That it was founded on this notion that we are better together united than we are on our own. It was a character or a idea that the country held so sacred that we went to war against ourselves to defend it. But it's interesting, if you look at America, when you really get into the character of the company, you realize that it stands for this notion of frontier, right? It stands for this notion of the land out west and possibility and opportunity. And if you think about what America was at its very, very best, was it delivered on that promise. When you came to America, it was about being able to go all the way out west and make a life that worked for you. And that notion of frontier, that notion of expansion, that notion of possibility, that notion of pursue the promise because you could do it, has lasted. And each time, you know, make a new industry, Henry Ford. Break the borders of space and earth. Break the borders of race and inequality. Keep trying, even in the face of defeat. So if you think about that character, that American ideal, and what America has stood for, it's this notion of frontier and keeping pushing west. Well, it turns out that institutions are really just the assemblage of collective desires of its people, right? And you know, it's especially true now when we're in such a divided country. It's more important than ever that we think about the character of what we actually stand for. Institutions have character. America has character. What makes Apple Apple? So if you think about the 13-year Renaissance journey that company's been on to refine its character and to make that character come true in every gesture. What makes the Louvre the Louvre? It's not only the collection. It's a curatorial sensibility about the meaning of art and culture in our lives. What makes the Tate the Tate? It's not just that lobby. It's what happens and the people who are within it. If you think about other things that you grew up with or that you respected, you know, what makes National Geographic, you know what's going to be between the pages of those yellow covers is an adventure to take you somewhere that you have never been. I mean, I was kind of an average public school kid in Southern California, and National Geographic was my gateway to the world. That's the way I saw the other places of the world, right? What makes Nike Nike, or Chanel Chanel, or Oxford Oxford? It's all about understanding the unique character of an institution and bringing it forth in every single aspect of what that institution does. So let me give you a little frame. It's something that we can use in the charrettes today, and it's so simple that most people will say, this is nothing, until you try to do it. And in which case you'll say, wow, this is actually kind of tricky. Think about the examples that we've talked about. Think about Perkins and Will. When this institution shows up, how do we prove that it looks like Perkins and Will? So when we show up, what do you expect of that interaction? What do we like as people? How does it look? How do we present our ideas? How do you come to understand who we are as an institution? What do we sound like? Are we collaborative? Are we generative? Are we argumentative? Are we logical? Are we humorous? Are we engaging? Are we optimistic? What do we sound like? How do we think? How is, when we show up, what is the evidence of our way of thinking about the world? So Apple, you know Apple, they think about all the obsessiveness to make something very complicated, very simple. And their thinking is made evident in the ease with which you can use their products and engage with the brand. So their thinking is made evident actually through subtraction, meaning what shows up in front of you has been so stripped bare of anything extra that it makes you respect how that company thinks. And then ultimately, how does it perform? So if the promise of this institution is X, how do we deliver on that every time we show up? So this simple frame, it's one Alan mentioned. I had a 3-year post, a Charles and Ray Eames Brand Fellow post at IBM. Basically, it was to use the power of design to help IBM become the company it wants to become in its second century. IBM turned 100 last year. And this is a simple frame that John Iwata and I, he leads marketing and citizenship there, and I put together to help all of the institutions you do business with think very, very simply about character. Who are you at each one of these levels? Because this is a firm that's often an assemblage of other firms that have joined this firm. These questions may not be quite as clearly answered because it's not that you were born of one thing and have all sprouted from one thing. You're an assemblage of things, right? So what is unique about our character? So as we get into this next charrette and we explore the ideas, why this firm and not another? What is the uniqueness that we do and not another? This is not just admiring the tear sheets of one architectural firm over yours. This is not just judging by the buildings you make over theirs. What's the character of this firm that's unique? And ask yourself, as we do this charrette, if we really embrace this idea, if we really did it, does it look like us? Does it sound like us? Does it think like us? Does it perform like us? Any of these ideas. And how could we better the idea to live up to this even more? Maybe the second part is every time we embrace a client, every massive project that we undertake, that you guys undertake, is a chance for them to clarify what their own character is, right? It's the highest paid service on earth is to help an institution understand its own identity. It's the most valuable thing that you can do. And so when we're having discussions about do we charge by the hour, or how do we manage projects, or how do we bid projects, remember that we're in the business of clarifying character and identity. There's no better gift you can give a client than helping them get clear on what they want to do in the world. If we believe that, do we act that way? If we believe that, do we engage that way? Because if you're helping someone basically become the best version of themselves, how would you show up as Perkins and Will? You would probably not negotiate your hourlies first. And then the next thing, which is you have all the gifts in the world to do this, is how do we make that character real in reality? You guys, the talents in this room, all the people who work for you, once we know that character, how do you make it vibrant? You know, I've been a long admirer of a lot of the work out there that you guys have worked on. And I think in your most promising work, you do this extraordinarily well. My question would be, do we do it in all of our work? Because I think this is the kind of institution that deserves to be great in everything it touches, not just its best projects. So my provocation as we dive in, let's think about this great institution. What do we stand for? What's our character uniquely? And then let's think about the clients we serve and understand their character, and how can we help them clarify it and then express it in the world.